Camels, some of the oldest and hardiest mammals on the planet, and some of the few large mammals that live in the harsh deserts of Africa and Asia. However, the last desert anyone would expect to find a camel would be the sands of Arizona, much less under a Walmart. As bizarre as it sounds, it's very true. The arid plains of North America were home to some of the most amazing varieties of camels ever witnessed, and one of the last was amongst the most widespread during the Ice Age. I am, of course, talking about the American camel itself, Camelops. Camelops was a genus of camel that once lived in North America during the Pleistocene, from approximately 3 million years ago to as recently as 13 to 10,000 years ago. Now I know what you're thinking. What the is a camel doing in North America? Well, believe it or not, camels actually have their origins on American soil. It's a story that's almost as old as the end of the dinosaurs. Following the extinction of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, the world was a very different place, with many groups of animals rising to take the place of Earth's ancient rulers. Crocodiles, snakes, birds, and by the Eocene 50 million years ago, so were the mammals. Camels were amongst the earliest of these new mammals, only vaguely resembling those alive today, being small, hoofless, and most interestingly, living in North America. As it turns out, camels and their closest kin first evolved in North America, and throughout those past 50 million years, had diversified into a myriad of forms throughout the age of mammals, exploding in diversity during the Oligocene and Miocene periods, between 40 to 30 million years ago. As the climate grew cooler, the rainforests at the start of the era gave way to grassland, where camels would start to evolve into more gracile, fleet-footed animals, while adapting to a diet of grasses and a variety of newly emerging plants. And with these wide open spaces and little competition, they began to grow larger as they continued to diversify, eventually splitting into two groups by the very beginnings of the Ice Age 4 million years ago: the llamas and the camelines, aka what we know as the true camels. It is from this later lineage that modern camels, and by extension Camelops, came to emerge, although they aren't directly related. As the Bering Strait would emerge linking Eurasia and North America, the ancestor of modern camels would split off from Camelops around 6 million years ago, as they migrated across the strait, gradually evolving into the wild Bactrian camels, and eventually the dromedaries. While modern camels spread throughout Asia, Camelops would remain solely in North America, where it would spread like wildfire. This genus of camel was everywhere, having been found on every corner of the North American continent, with at least 3 different species living throughout North America during the Ice Age. It speaks to how adaptable these animals were even as far back as the Ice Age, as one of the most common animals to be found amongst Pleistocene deposits. Hell, they're so common, 2 juveniles were even found in Arizona under a Walmart construction site. It helps that Camelops wasn't a picky eater, similar to modern camels. We have a pretty good idea of what Camelops ate, thanks to a number of preserved materials, from dung to isotopes, and even teeth preserving their last meals, revealing the diet of Camelops consisted of grasses, shrubs, and leafy plants, especially those of tall, low-hanging branches, and proportionately longer legs than modern camels, suggesting that it was a browser, while feeding on less thornier plants than their cousins. What's even more remarkable of a difference is that Camelops might not have even had a hump. Surprisingly enough, we have very little evidence for a hump on Camelops, let alone how many if it did. And the humps of modern camels may very well be traits belonging to them alone. Camels around today evolved their humps to store fat and nutrients due to living in areas that were remote, where food and water are relatively scarce, while traveling long distances between those various different extreme conditions, and it's important to consider that the various species of Camelops in North America didn't live in such extreme environments. Pleistocene North America was a much cooler place, quite literally. As the ice sheet of the northern hemisphere began to spread farther southward, the climate grew colder and drier. Yet surprisingly, the land was fairly lush. Many of the arid deserts and canyons of western North America were once host to woodlands and greenery, fed by rivers and streams of the glaciers of the north. The lush lands of North America meant that Camelops didn't really have any pressure to evolve such specialized humps. And while there is some evidence for said humps, thanks to the raised neural spines of their vertebrae, the soft tissue could easily make the difference. And it's even more puzzling to consider that while Camelops is often reconstructed similar to a dromedary camel, they're much closer in relation to Bactrian camels, who have 2 humps.
What a twist!
Whatever the case may be, Camelops had something going for it that was clearly working. Being not only one of the most widespread genera of North America's Ice Age megafauna, but coexisting with a menagerie of other giants. From mastodons to mammoths to ground sloths, along with some of the most ferocious mammalian predators to ever scour the landscape, being a favorite prey item to the fabled saber-tooth, Smilodon. However, they were also a favorite prey of another Ice Age hunter, humans. Various bones of Camelops have shown signs of having been butchered by humans, and for the longest time it was thought that humans were responsible for their extinction. However, recent evidence has found this hypothesis not only unlikely, but fairly colonialist in its mindset, with evidence indicating that Camelops and Ice Age cultures coexisted for a fairly decent duration of the time. The most likely culprit seems to have been climate change. As temperatures began to warm at the end of the Pleistocene, the glaciers began to recede. And as western North America's climate began to grow more arid, many of the tall leaves Camelops relied on for browsing began to disappear. By contrast, it's no mystery why modern camels were able to survive the end of the Pleistocene. They're pretty hardy, even for mammal standards, living in some of the most extreme environments any large vertebrate has ever experienced, and have adapted and adopted various extreme adaptations to survive conditions of drought, cold, lack of food. The list goes on. And it's these traits that have not only made them so successful, but so invaluable to humans even in the modern day. The partnership between humans and camels throughout several ages and civilizations have allowed both mammals to flourish and survive in the harshest conditions, even amongst the challenges of a changing world. Ironically, the close relationship modern camels have with humans is what has allowed them to survive into the modern day with flying colors, unlike their cousin, whose pressures from climate change and people may have spelled its doom. And yet, it's an astounding example of how the variety and adaptability of camels have made them some of the most successful mammals to ever roam this planet.